"We're terminating you effective immediately. Security will escort you out," he said, without even looking up from his brand new company-issued laptop, still halfway through logging into his Slack account for the first time. The CEO's son. Day one, hour one. Me. No handshake, no explanation. Just some trembling junior HR rep standing behind him like she was watching someone defuse a bomb with a butter knife. I'm Hunter Sullivan, 48 years old, and I'd just watched this kid destroy his own family's empire without even knowing it. The ink on his onboarding packet was still wet, and he was already playing executioner. Brandon Walsh had his blonde hair styled like he was heading to a photo shoot, his resume printed on thick cream cardstock, and his MBA confidence inflated like a bounce house at a divorce party. He didn't ask questions, he didn't even blink, just read the line off his tablet word for word. You could tell someone coached him, probably his dad or the mirror. I didn't flinch or argue. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and handed over my badge with the kind of grace you learn after 18 years of swallowing power plays and watching boardroom egos collide. He thought he was firing me, thought this was his first big move as chief strategy officer. All I said was, "I want to do this right. Tell your father the board meeting in 3 hours should be interesting." Then I walked out, past the silent HR rep, past the security guard who looked more confused than concerned, past the framed photo of the founding family in the lobby that, funny enough, left out the guy who actually wrote the code they built their entire software empire on. And hey, while I've got you here, if this already feels like the kind of corporate chaos that makes your jaw drop, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Not because I'm begging, I've been kicked out of nicer offices, but because it really helps the team keep digging up these stories and exposing what really happens behind those glass doors. You'd be surprised how often the person getting fired is the one holding all the cards. Now, back to our regularly scheduled meltdown. 3 hours. That's how long Brandon had between his first firing and his first legal disaster. In that time, I imagine he celebrated, maybe popped a little champagne in his corner office, my old office, if we're being precise. Maybe drafted up a chipper little LinkedIn post about decisive leadership and tough calls. Hell, he probably already had the hashtags queued up. Hashtag leadership, hashtag next chapter, hashtag disruptor, or whatever buzzword his personal brand consultant told him to sprinkle in. Meanwhile, the board packet had already gone out. Clause 19B, titled plainly Emergency Reassignment and Voting Suspension Trigger, buried in the original shareholder agreement like a landmine nobody expected to step on. Written by yours truly, reviewed by legal, signed by every investor who ever asked. But what happens if leadership goes rogue? The answer? If an executive is terminated without a formal board vote, and that termination is initiated by an appointee with no equity, well, then the appointee loses all interim authority. The board convenes within the day. Voting power reverts to the majority shareholder, me. Because while Brandon was sipping bubbly and measuring for new curtains, I was filing that clause activation, dated, signed, time-stamped, and couriered to every board member, investor, and general counsel tied to TechFlow Industries. And unlike his welcome packet, mine came with a certified return receipt. He thought I'd go quietly. What he didn't know was that I never built this company's infrastructure to be seen. I built it to be safe from people exactly like him, entitled, impatient, handed power like it came with the family Wi-Fi password. He wasn't the first to underestimate me, but he might just be the last, because by the time his LinkedIn post got halfway drafted, his name was already flagged in the system as unrecognized executive, no voting rights, pending shareholder review. And the founder, his father Ryan Walsh, still hadn't seen the packet, but he would. Oh, he would. There's a reason my name doesn't appear in the glossy company brochures or on the About Us page. I was the shadow in the server room, the architect in the code, the guy you called when the compliance audits were circling like vultures, and the SEC wanted to know why your API documentation looked like it was written by a caffeinated intern. I never wanted the spotlight. I wanted structure, stability, leverage, and equity. God, the equity. While they were naming conference rooms after the founder's grandkids and handing out plaques to people who'd been here 5 fiscal quarters, I was taking payment in percentages. Half a point here, a full point there. Equity, not bonuses. Voting shares, not titles. Every time a deal closed or an investor came sniffing, I negotiated another sliver, quietly, efficiently. I didn't play poker. I built the table and printed the cards. It started back when TechFlow was 2 folding chairs, a whiteboard, and a founder who thought version control was something you did with TV remotes. Ryan Walsh was a visionary, sure, the kind who couldn't remember if we'd backed up our databases or if we'd accidentally sent our encryption keys to the guy who painted our break room. I stepped in, streamlined, stabilized, secured, and for my trouble he offered me a VP title. I declined, asked for stock instead. "You'd rather own the ceiling than sit under it," he joked. "Exactly," I said. By year 3, I was sitting on 18%. By year 8, 41%. The CTO left in a screaming match over outsourced development, something about moving our core authentication system to some offshore team who'd never heard of OAuth 2.0. I picked up his shares at a deep discount. Divorce is expensive, and he needed liquidity fast. When Ryan's brother tried to sue us into oblivion over some patent nonsense and failed spectacularly, he offered to settle, privately. I took his remaining 31% in exchange for a bulletproof NDA and a promise never to leak the family's offshore tax disaster. 72%. That's where I sat, quietly. No fanfare, no parades, just majority ownership neatly filed in the Delaware Corporate Registry. And nestled inside that ownership was Clause 19B, a weird little appendix section nobody ever bothered to read because we'd never needed it. The clause said that if a non-equity executive ever terminated a corporate officer without board vote, all executive powers would be suspended pending shareholder review. It was a clause for emergencies, betrayals, stupidity. I wrote it after Ryan's nephew tried to fire the entire QA department during a tantrum about bug reports. Apparently, he thought unit testing was slowing down innovation. I watched his access get revoked in 48 hours. That was the last time anyone touched power they didn't earn. Until now. Because what Brandon didn't understand, what nobody told him in his overpriced business school, was that inheriting a title doesn't mean inheriting control. Control isn't gifted. It's not in your last name or on your office door. It's in the server logs, in the code repositories, in the clause written during a 2 a.m. call with a paranoid investor from Boston who wanted to know what would happen if someone's tech-illiterate kid got promoted. Turns out it activates exactly like this. One smug little firing, no board vote, no cause, no process. Just a kid with fresh teeth whitening and a new email signature strutting into my office like he was rebooting Silicon Valley. He had no clue that by reading that script, he'd triggered a corporate trapdoor that had been bolted shut for 15 years, just waiting for someone dumb enough to step on it. Now that clause was live. I didn't just send the activation letter, I sent a full legal packet, shareholder statements, equity breakdown, archived commit logs, time-stamped documents, notarized copies, even included his little termination memo, signed and dated, complete with its grammatical errors and HR cosign. They'd laugh about that one later. Well, someone would. Because while Brandon was figuring out how to order office furniture and get his keycard upgraded to executive floors, the board was reading a memo titled Immediate Suspension of Executive Authority, Clause 19B. He was about to learn what real power looks like in the software business. And Ryan had no idea his newest family heirloom had just stepped on a landmine with his name engraved on the trigger. But that call was coming, and he wouldn't be laughing. Somewhere on the 20th floor, in a glass-walled office he hadn't earned and didn't understand, Brandon Walsh poured himself a flute of celebratory champagne, the kind of bottle they saved for IPOs or exits, neither of which were on his horizon. He popped the cork like he'd just slayed a dragon, not fired the guy who was the dragon, and replaced him with absolutely no one. First day, first problem. Solved, he texted his girlfriend. Time to clean house. He kicked off his Italian loafers, crossed his legs like he'd seen in a million stock photo CEO poses, and opened his laptop to begin drafting a LinkedIn post that would have made any PR intern vomit from secondhand embarrassment. Something about making tough calls for long-term vision. He paused halfway through typing, "Leadership is action, not a title," unaware he was about to lose both. Meanwhile, downstairs, metaphorically and literally, the board members were opening a very different kind of package. One sealed in a fireproof FedEx envelope stamped confidential, Clause 19B activation. The courier had arrived 15 minutes prior, handed the packets to executive assistants like they were jury summons, and left without a word. Inside that packet was a 3-inch thick stack of corporate hell. Cover page, Clause 19B activation, shareholder transition proposal. Subheading, Request for immediate emergency board meeting, under bylaw 8.4. Attached was a signed trigger letter dated that morning, time-stamped at 7:03 a.m., hours before I was ever terminated. Accompanying it, complete equity breakdown, every share I'd acquired over 18 years, every transaction, every co-signed agreement, a full portfolio ledger with notarizations and verified Delaware filings. The reaction wasn't instant. It was worse. It was slow. That creeping kind of dread when you realize you're not in trouble, you're in litigation, and you just hadn't checked your email yet. By the time Ryan's personal counsel skimmed the clause and hit the key phrase suspension of executive authority upon unilateral termination by non-equity appointee, he actually said out loud, "Oh no," and then again, quieter, "Oh no." The packet also included a meeting mandate. The board was legally required to convene within 3 hours. That timer had already started. I made sure of that. I didn't need to be in the building. The law was. The contracts were. And by the time Brandon's celebratory Instagram story hit, champagne on deck, first move made with a boomerang of clinking glasses, his name was already flagged by DocuSign audit logs as the sole initiator of a termination he had no authority to make. Meanwhile, across the city and in 2 time zones, board members were canceling lunches, skipping golf, and calling their assistants to reschedule quarterly reviews. They weren't happy. They were trapped. Because once Clause 19B activates, it's not about office politics anymore. It's about fiduciary duty, voting rights, SEC exposure, their personal assets, their names on filings they never reviewed. This wasn't some family spat. This was a legally binding reversion of control. And there, in black and white, was the number they hadn't thought about in years, 72% majority shareholder voting control. Clause trigger, emergency recall of all executive appointments made in the last 48 hours. Immediate revocation of non-board sanctioned authority. My authority reinstated the moment his was voided. Oh, and let's not forget the cherry on top. The clause wasn't just real, it was irreversible once filed. That little fact had been added during a very specific investor scare years ago. They wanted assurance that if someone did go rogue, they couldn't undo the emergency meeting with a panicked apology and a retracted memo. There was no take-back button. So while Brandon strutted through the hallway with his little clipboard trying to figure out how to access the internal financial systems, the boardroom chairs were already being filled. Ryan hadn't arrived yet, but his phone had buzzed twice, and both times he ignored the screen. The third time he picked up, and everything changed. Ryan was mid-back swing on hole 7 at the country club he half-funded, chewing a cigar that matched his tan and his ego when the first call came in. Ignored. Second one, too. It wasn't until the third ring, persistent, sharp, from his general counsel's personal line, that he grunted, dropped the club, and snapped, "This better be good." What followed wasn't good. It wasn't even bad. It was catastrophic. "I need you back at headquarters," the voice on the other end said. "Right now." "What? Why?" he barked. "You need to hear this in person. Your son signed something." Click. He didn't finish the round, didn't tip the caddy, didn't change out of his golf cleats, just stormed to the Escalade and made it back to the office in under 20 minutes, an Olympic record for someone who usually required 2 assistants and a valet just to get through the front door. When he arrived, legal was waiting. So was the CFO, 1 trembling assistant, and a half-full conference room where nobody was smiling anymore. The general counsel didn't waste time, just opened a leather folder, took a breath, and read, "Per Clause 19B of the amended shareholder agreement, any executive termination carried out by a non-equity appointee without prior board vote shall result in immediate revocation of all interim leadership authority, suspension of suite appointments made within the past 48 hours, and automatic deferment of executive control to the majority shareholder pending emergency board review." Ryan froze for a second. He looked like he hadn't heard English. Then his jaw clenched, his temples pulsed, and he growled, "Who signed the termination?" No one answered. He asked again, louder, more desperate, "Who the hell signed the termination?" The CFO swallowed hard, eyes flicking to the junior assistant who looked like she might vomit into her tablet. Finally, the general counsel responded, flat and unforgiving, "Your son, alone." The silence in that room was surgical. Ryan blinked once, slowly, then again. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug behind his ears. He doesn't have sign-off authority, he said, as if saying it out loud could somehow roll back the clock. No, the attorney said. He doesn't. He never did. He was appointed CSO by you, ratified by the board, and he holds zero equity. His authority is entirely derivative, which means, under Clause 19b, his unilateral termination of a corporate officer is invalid and illegal. Ryan ran a hand over his mouth, pacing, muttering under his breath, Jesus Christ. Then louder, this is a misunderstanding. I'll talk to him. We'll rescind. The lawyer didn't let him finish. There is no rescind. The clause is live. It's been triggered. Paperwork was filed before the termination was executed. Time-stamped, notarized, and distributed to all investors. You've got 2 hours left before the emergency meeting begins. But he's family, Ryan tried. He's not shareholding family, the attorney cut in. And right now he's sitting in your former architect's office asking ET how to change the company mission statement. Ryan sat down hard like the chair had punched him. His hands were shaking. No longer the swaggering patriarch of a $200 million software portfolio, just an aging man who realized he'd handed a loaded gun to someone who thought the safety was optional. Where is he? He asked, voice barely audible. Probably writing a press release, the CFO muttered. Ryan looked up, eyes red. What do we do? The general counsel closed the folder. You sit in that boardroom, you listen, you do not interrupt, and when Hunter walks in, because he will walk in, you remember that he holds 72% of this company. God help us all, Ryan said, mostly to himself. And as he stood slowly, painfully, you could see it land in his gut like a punch from his own past. He never gave me power. I took it, one line of code at a time. Meanwhile, Brandon was still blissfully unaware. The termination memo was signed that morning, the first thing he did before the coffee even finished brewing. Send a Slack to it. Please deactivate all access for Hunter Sullivan. Immediate lockout. Full system sweep. No thanks. No signature. Just corporate bark typed with manicured nails. He was still basking in the buzz of perceived authority, probably thinking he was making history instead of tripping a wire. He CC'd 3 directors and added a smiley face to soften the blow, like emojis could patch legal sinkholes. The IT director saw the message at 9:22 a.m. He stared at it, then at the terminal, then at the internal registry list, the real one, not the vanity dashboards that the C-suite used for board presentations. This was the back end, the bones, and right there in bold text, Primary Administrator, Hunter Sullivan, Compliance Authority, Token Holder, Hunter Sullivan, Legal Digital Signatory for Contractual Binding, Hunter Sullivan, Shareholder Registry Control, Hunter Sullivan, Equity Stake Control, Access, 72.04%, Hunter Sullivan. He did not freeze the account. He did not lock me out. He did not even reply. Instead, he walked his laptop to legal, sat it down gently like a bomb with a timer ticking under the keyboard, and said, he's still wired in fully. If I deactivate him, we lose access to 3 compliance tools, 7 investor portals, the SEC auto-filing API, the shareholder ledger. Legal didn't even look up. Don't touch it. 10 minutes later, Brandon strolled by, acting like he ran the place. The IT guy said nothing. Legal said less. The building had gone quiet, hushed like a hospital wing before bad news. Back in Brandon's office, he returned to his half-finished LinkedIn post. He read it aloud once more. Today, I made my first difficult decision as Chief Strategy Officer. Leadership means prioritizing the health of the company, even when it's uncomfortable. I'm proud of our direction. Leadership has strategic thinking. Next chapter. He stared at the blinking cursor, added a line. A new era begins. But his fingers didn't move to hit post. Not yet, because something was off. His inbox had gone quiet. No new messages from legal. No congratulatory replies from the board. And he noticed something else. The digital dashboard that usually displayed voting thresholds and operational metrics. It was grayed out, like someone had flipped a switch he didn't know existed. He tried accessing the cap table. Error. He tried approving his own expense request. Denied. He tried to schedule a leadership memo through internal comms. Blocked. The digital systems weren't crashing. They were rejecting him. And then, as if summoned by dread itself, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. One text from the lead investor. What's happening? I thought Hunter was untouchable. He reread it twice, mouth dry, then checked the sender. Confirmed it wasn't a prank. lead investor. The one who personally flew across the country last year to beg me to mediate a merger dispute. Untouchable. That word wasn't about him. It was about the man he had just tried to delete. The boardroom was already full by the time Brandon arrived. The kind of full that doesn't allow for conversation. Just glances, clipped whispers, papers shuffled for show. No pastries, no coffee, just water. Ice melting slowly in sweating glasses like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees and nobody wanted to say it out loud. He walked in wearing a cream-colored power suit that had never seen a courtroom. His expression still that same glossy smugness he'd worn all morning, like this was just another meeting on a checklist. He clutched his leather portfolio, oblivious to the storm he'd walked into. A few heads turned, but none with the smile he was expecting. Most avoided eye contact altogether. "Good afternoon," he chirped, giving a little nod to the chair at the head of the table. He moved toward it. Nobody moved to stop him until he was halfway seated. Then the board chair, an old man with fingers like driftwood and a memory like a filing cabinet, cleared his throat. "You can observe, of course," he said flatly. "But that seat is reserved." Brandon blinked, stopped mid-motion. Reserved for who? The room didn't answer. Instead, the general counsel spoke from the far end of the table, flipping a thick packet of documents closed with surgical calm. Per Clause 19B of the Shareholder Agreement, your appointment as Chief Strategy Officer has been suspended effective immediately, pending shareholder review. His voice was small but sharp. "Excuse me?" "Suspended," the counsel repeated. "Void. You hold no equity and did not vote on your position. The termination you initiated this morning was unauthorized, and under the clause, all executive authority granted to you has been revoked." He looked around, waiting for someone, anyone, to intervene. Ryan, silent, staring at a spot on the table like it had insulted him personally. The CFO looking down at his phone, scrolling like he was trying to fast forward through reality. Even his girlfriend, seated near the end, wouldn't meet his eyes. She looked like she was trying to become the chair itself. He started, voice faltering. "I don't understand. That clause wasn't... It was just a hypothetical. I mean, no one's used it before." The legal advisor adjusted his glasses. "It's in effect. It was activated with proper documentation this morning, time-stamped, notarized, and distributed before your action was initiated." He tried to laugh, just a little, the way he did at cocktail parties when someone told a joke he didn't get. "Okay, but who even triggered it?" No one answered. Just a long pause heavy enough to bend the walls. He looked at Ryan, pleading now. Ryan didn't move. Finally, the chair leaned back, the leather groaning like it was judging him. "He did," he said simply. "The one you tried to erase." My name wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be, because my presence was already in the room. Felt, not seen, like the gravity had shifted toward an invisible center. At exactly 2:59 p.m., the door handle turned. Slow, deliberate. You could feel the room tense like a live wire. Nobody spoke. Even Brandon stopped fiddling with his pen. I walked in at 3 o'clock on the dot. No rush, no fanfare. I wore the same black suit they'd seen me in 1,000 times before, tailored like a second skin. Not flashy, not loud, but unmistakably mine. The kind of presence that didn't need introduction or explanation. I didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't ask permission. I walked straight to the head of the table, the seat Ryan hadn't touched since the claws landed like a guillotine, and placed a leather folder in front of me. I didn't sit. I opened it and read. My voice was calm, not theatrical, not emotional, just fact. As majority shareholder, I said, I formally request a binding vote to rescind all suite appointments made in the past 48 hours, pending shareholder review. The words hit like bricks. The chair cleared his throat. Motion received, logged, will be entered into record for immediate consideration. Brandon looked like he might faint. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. And still, I didn't speak. Nobody did, because there it was, written, spoken, witnessed, a reminder that I hadn't lost control when I was escorted out. I had given them the illusion of it. I'll stay, I said when asked about taking a seat. Not a request, not a threat, just a statement of fact. No, I said when someone gestured to an empty chair. I'll stand, It wasn't defiance, it was dominance. Quiet, absolute, and terrifying because you don't sit when you already own the table. Ryan finally spoke. A whisper. You set this up. My eyes locked on his. I protected what you handed to children. The next morning, Brandon's badge didn't work. Ryan's resignation email was already sent, and I walked back into the building, not as an employee returning, but as an owner who'd never really left. Power isn't loud. It's silent, strategic, patient, and impossible to fire. Thanks for watching, Legends. Subscribe to keep the corporate chaos alive.